Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is Mk1, and today I'd like to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. Now, I may not always be on time with holiday stuff, but today I was able to make it, so I might as well give you a little treat and go into something new that I have found myself fascinated in, and actually explore how I produce things. Now, as you can imagine, talking about my production is probably going to take more than one less than 14-minute episode. So, as you can imagine, you're getting a two-parter. One for today and one for tomorrow. So, without further ado, if you couldn't already tell, we're looking at the Jaegers. Now, you may be asking, what is a Jaeger? I've never heard you use this word. Well, a Jaeger, in the context of the Pacific Rim franchise, is a giant mech that is piloted by two pilots via drift compatibility, which is basically their minds are linked and they can both see and act as one. This was made largely because it allowed the stress load of piloting one of these things to be divided, prevented the deaths of pilots, as happened in early testing with the prototype Jaeger. Now, the lineup you see here stands in order of both their production in the real world, in terms of how I built them, and how they were produced in the Pacific Rim universe, with Tacit Ronin being confirmed the first Mk1 that came after Brawler Yukon, Romeo Blue following second, Horizon Brave following third, and Cherno Alpha following fourth. And of course, the list goes on. Now, as you can imagine, with Pacific Rim, there are a lot of inconsistencies sometimes, especially including mark categories. But after doing a lot of research, I can tell you that this production series that I've got going on here will consist of 8 Mk1 units. After doing a bit of digging, I've combined both canon or game exclusive character Jaegers into the production queue based on their mark classification and what's established. And with Coyote Tango being the last confirmed Mk1 built, any Mk1 it came between Cherno Alpha and Coyote Tango. So, that being said, let's get into these 4. With Tacit Ronin representing Japan, if it wasn't obvious, it features a much swifter body style than the rest. Well, somewhat swift, at least in the actual movie verse. And it is largely reliant on bladed weaponry because at the time, they did not have knowledge of how much Kaiju Blue could damage the ecosystem. Then Romeo Blue, come right after, relies largely on its piston arm, which basically acts as a double punch, whereas the fist actually makes contact, the arm backs it up and sends a second force through the Kaiju, which are the giant monsters. Then you've got Horizon Brave, which, if the cannons on its shoulders weren't any indication, it fires ice-based or cryo-based weaponry that freezes the Kaiju and effectively shatters its body, as seen in the movie with Gypsy Danger doing that to Leatherback. I mean, not Leatherback, Itachi. Then you've got Cherno Alpha with incendiary turbines and the obviously hench fists. It's pretty obvious that this dudette means business. So, that being said, now let's get into a bit of the production side of things. Firstly, we're going to talk about the early stage of construction, which is basically doing up the designs and such. In terms of the designs, as you can see here, we've got the parts for Coyote Tango. The main thing you need that I found helps a lot with this is a good reference. And over there, you can see my reference is of Coyote Tango's concept art. While concept art may sometimes not be the best references, most of the Pacific Rim universe's concept art largely came into fruition on the big screen. And so, with it being probably some of the best thing for getting extra details in, I'm using it. And as you can see, it's a fairly close match, given the shading of the concept art. Now, as you can see, it's not exact. It doesn't look like the other 4 because it's in a parts bag. Why do I have it in a parts bag? It allows me to effectively stockpile all the parts needed and have them ready before I construct the Jaegers, or any other model in fact matter. And it effectively allows for me to basically slap them together like a Lego with speed, depending on time. But yeah, and this is something I've done for every model I've made for the most part, and it's really actually helped with pacing. And something else of note is the bag itself can be dual-purposed. On one hand, it can store the parts of the Jaeger. On the other hand, it can also store the limbs of a Jaeger, which can happen during general overhauls, which, as you can obviously tell by some of the things I've described, will probably be coming soon, as Romeo Blue needs a piston arm, Cherno Alpha needs its Tesla fist, which, as you can imagine, probably won't actually be electrified. So, yeah. These parts bags will definitely be frequent whenever you try to make something like this, which was largely the reason why I'm doing this section, so that way you guys can try too if you so choose. Now then, next thing is joints. As you can see, the joints themselves here are largely very foreign, as some of them stick out and jut out at odd angles and are able to articulate when they normally wouldn't be able to. Now, I'll go into more depth in this in the second video, but I will say for now that it is largely a matter of mixing two separate pin-type structures into one, and using them to effectively make a double joint in one that mimics a ball joint, but is not a ball joint and cannot do the same things to the same extent. Now then, that being said, we're going to get into one issue that needs to be addressed before I sign off. That issue is, if it isn't obvious sometimes, their thighs. If you look on the concept art of Kaido Tango here, the thighs on most Jaegers were very freaking long. They were like sausages attached to biscuits, if you get my meaning. But over here, they are much more stumpy when you have the actual thigh joint combined with the rest of the thigh leading into the leg. This cuts out details like the 28 symbol or other symbols here on each Jaeger. But that is something that is a double-edged sword, because while the shortened height loses details, it affirms stability due to the fact that they effectively wrap around each other and make the whole joint denser. This means that it's a lot harder to tear the thigh apart now. So hey, if it's up to you whether when you're building something or not to follow my lead and make it overlap over each other, or whether you want to go the riskier route and chance it at making the legs proportionally longer, whilst also maintaining the same details, which might also cost you a bit more in production. Now, that being said, I think it's about time we will sign up. Before we go, I'd like to propose a question for anybody watching. Out of the Jaeger designs you see here, the Japanese Jaeger, known as Tesseronin, American boy over here, Romeo Blue, Chinese Horizon Brave, and Russian Cherno Alpha, which design do you like the best? I'd be very interested to hear, since I don't usually often get feedback on these. Now, that being said, this has been DarkX1, and I will see you tomorrow for the second part where we go further in depth into the creation of the joints on these figures. Have a good one.